who, with our national confederation, encompasses almost 300 parents organizations all over India. It is really a pleasure for us that almost nearing 200 people, friends of ours all over the country, have opted to join this webinar, though, and we have opened it up to YouTube also. So, and we are really absolutely honored that honorable speakers, Dr. Alok Gohar, former chairperson, National Trust of India, Dr. Poonam Natarajan, former chairperson, National Trust of India, Dr. Alka Gupta, Director Academics of Deep Shikha, Ranchi, Dr. Alok Gohar of Manavikash, New Delhi, and our beloved Parivar National Confederation of Parents Organization, NCPO President, Commander Sriram Visual, who have all agreed to be with us today to enlighten us on National Education Policy 2020. As we hope that we'll learn from all of them on the subject, there is a question and answer session, and all the participants are requested to write your questions to in chat. Our host and co-host, Mr. Arunashish Adhikari and Mr. Siddhartha Shankar Mukhopadhyay, they will sort your questions and put it to the speakers at the end of their speech. We must mention that we are really grateful to Bhavna Child Development Center that they have given us the opportunity to have this webinar on this Zoom, and also they have opened up their YouTube channel. Thank you all. I am handing over to Madam Ayana Kundu, Technical Advisor, Parivar NCPO, to coordinate the program. Next, Mrs. Ayana Kundu, please.
Thank you, Shominda. Can I be heard? Yes. Can you hear me? It is my privilege to introduce the 5 eminent speakers this evening, especially as I've had the good fortune to know most of them personally. There's such a long list of the illustrious work they have all achieved, and I hope I will be excused for shortening it to ensure that we have more time to listen to each of you. The first speaker today is Dr. Alok Gohar, who is best known as the founder chairperson of the National Trust. She has traveled the length and breadth of our country. She has been the controller of examinations, RCI, the technical officer of Mental Health and Substance Abuse Unit, WHO, Southeast Asia Regional Office, New Delhi, and had 45 years experience exclusively in disability and development, in teaching, training, administration, policy making, evaluation, mentoring, and monitoring. The tremendous work that Dr. Gohar has done started with being the director of Spastic Society Tamil Nadu, where she developed and implemented the horizontal convergence model of rehabilitation. She has successfully completed projects funded by UNICEF, represented the government of India with regard to the Bivako Millennium in Bangkok and Japan, written several books and presented papers at national and international level. We are looking forward to hearing you, Dr. Gohar, on giving us the overview of the national education policy. Over to you, Dr. Gohar. Dr. Gohar?
Yes, I have unmuted myself. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay. Thank you so much, Iona, and thank you, Parivar, for inviting me. And actually, Spastel was not my first job. One of my first jobs was in Chennai, early intervention programs with the Association of um, Maharashtra, working with an organization that's now headed by Sriram Visual. So I'm going to start my presentation. Um, if I can, yeah. Where's my share option? Uh, oops. I'm going to log out and log in again. Just give me 1 minute, please. I don't seem to have the login. Parivar, Parivar. Okay. Uh, where's my share option?
Madam, your share access is there. You can just try.
Yeah, I lost it. So I'm starting again.
Okay.
Okay. Uh, just give me 1 minute.
You can check in the lower portion of the Zoom
I
screen.
know, I know. I just give me 1 minute. I
Okay.
seem to have logged out of that whole page.
Okay. Okay. Okay.
So I'm joining the meeting again. Will you get someone to let me in so I can make my presentation from here? I've logged out.
Okay. Okay. Once you try to log in, I'll you allow. No problem.
I've tried to log in. Yes. Can you see me?
You are already in live.
I know, but I'm not getting that option which says share option. Uh, ওই পেজটাই পাচ্ছি না, কিছু একটা করেছি গন্ডগোল।
আপনি একবার মিটিং থেকে লিভ করে আবার জয়েন করুন। আমি
সেইটাই চেষ্টা করছি।
আপনি স্ক্রিনের পর মাউসটা দিলে হয়ে গেছে। In the meantime, I'll ask Mrs. Kundu, Ainadi, can you please continue to talk something?
বলুন।
Can you talk something so that
Oh,
before Madam joins back, we can continue?
yes. Would you prefer, should I ask if the next speaker or we'll just wait? Alkadi.
Miss Shaminda can tell it.
Shominda, can you please unmute yourself? What is very good about today's program is that it is going to focus on people with intellectual and developmental disability. This particular focus we have not had the opportunity of witnessing before. So we are all really looking forward to this evening, especially since we work in this focus sector. As we know, we have all done, I mean, most of us have really looked through the policy in detail. And there are, from the 5 speakers today, at least 2 or 3 of them have been speaking a lot that we have heard. So we wanted to share their knowledge and expertise with everyone, because they are all bringing us hope, as well as action plans for the future, for the near future. So, you know, please bear with us for a little while these technical glitches are seen to. This is the
may we go to the second speaker?
Yes, please, Shominda.
May we
Should
go
we
to the
ask?
second?
I don't know if the second, if Poonam is there. I'll just ask her if she's in 1 minute. Okay.
Didi, just I saw that Mrs. Gohar just entered.
Oh, he has entered. She has entered, I think. I again welcome to all in today's webinar on impact of National Education Policy 2020. Actually, I had already welcomed you all, but many of you were not present at that time. And when Madam Alka Gupta has already reached, so let us continue. Dr. Alka Gupta speak.
Okay. The showman has my PowerPoint. Arunashish? Arunashish?
Yes,
আমার PowerPoint-টাতে share করো তো।
Okay, just a minute.
By the time Arunashish gets ready, I just inform you that we have 5 speakers today. Dr. Alka Gupta, she is already in the screen. Dr. Poonam Natarajan, former chairperson, National Trust of India. Dr. Alka Nizmi, Director Academics of Dipshi Karachi. Dr. Alok Bhuvan, he has not reached as yet, but he will be reaching soon, of Manavikas, New Delhi, and our beloved Parivar NCPO President, Commander Sriram Visual. Let us hear from them. Okay? Yes, madam.
Madam, I've shared your presentation. Hello. Hello.
Start.
Yes, please.
Okay, my first slide is on the dispersion of light through prism. Can you see my slides? Can you see my slides?
Yes, yes.
You can see my slides?
Yes, yes, yes.
Okay, my first slide is on the speakers today. First, I will do an overview and then a little bit on school education, followed by inclusive and equitable education by Poonam, higher education by and teacher education by Alka, and parents' perspective on by Shirangji and Alok. I'm not entirely sure what he's speaking on. So my second slide is on the structure of the. I got one share screen. Okay, share screen. Host disabled participant. Okay, my second slide. I'm having huge issues today. This is very annoying. Host disabled my. That very. Okay, my second slide is on the structure, which has four chapters. Four, not four chapters. Sorry, it has four parts, which is on school education, 8 chapters, higher education, 10 chapters, and part 3 is on other key areas. Part 4 is making it happen. I'm going to be talking about the first 8 chapters. Next slide, please. The third slide is my introduction to the role of schools. Next slide. Talking about the structure, and this is very interesting because it's a whole new paradigm. 5 plus 4, 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4. So the first 5 years, as we all know, is the most important part, and the new education policy very clearly talks about the inclusion of children with disabilities in this particular group. Now, NCERT is going to develop a national curriculum framework for pedagogy in early childhood education, and that's going to be in 2 parts. The first part will be 3 to 6, which is for the schools, and 0 to 3 will be for parents for developing guidelines for early childhood education at home. So all of you who are parents here, please look forward to this. I'm sure it will work out very well. The next one, and this is particularly what we need for school readiness, because we take advantage of neuroplasticity of the child, any children, but particularly children with disability. Next slide, please. Yes. The aims of early childhood education and the aims of early intervention, as we know it, is school readiness. And they have 5 domains: physical and motor, cognitive, social, emotional, development of communication. I think I've lost, yeah, also cultural artistic development, and this is amazing because we don't have it in early intervention, but to be very good for us. Most important, they will develop behavior, and we all know that positive behavior supports now talks about teaching behavior as a subject. Next slide, please. We're talking here, what else is new? First, a very clear statement in the policy saying ensuring the inclusion and equal participation of children with disabilities in ECCE and the schooling system will be accorded the highest priority. And also in chapter 1, we talk about 1.1 to 1.6 and then again 1.9, which talks about preparatory class called Bal Vatika for 5 to 6 year olds. So 1 year of school preparation, particularly for school readiness. And parts of the school which are unused will be used for Samajik Chetna Kendras. And this is really an awareness program which we are doing today. We haven't had time to study the impact of it, but from the disability perspective, what we are expecting is what I'm talking about today. Next slide, please. So, what are the other chapters, portions that are relevant to disability? First is chapter 2, functional literacy and numeracy. And we will certainly benefit from that. We're talking about a national mentoring functional literacy mission on mentoring. So all volunteers, including everybody who is educated in the community, in the village, will be asked to participate. And this will be very good for all our children because they'll get all that extra help. I go to chapter 3, 3.1, 3.2, 3.3. We talk about children with disability. What is going to happen to them? Well, there are two measures. The first measure is the positive one, that we have such a good structure, such good infrastructure, including teachers, that nobody drops out anymore. And number two, in case they do drop out, including children with disabilities, we have a very active surveillance and dropout tracking system in using social workers, using psychologists from the Ministry of Social Justice and Employment to check them. Chapter 4 is curriculum and pedagogy. I'll do that later. Chapter 7 is developing a school complex. And that's interesting because you'll have your Anganwadi, all your preschool work, upper primary, lower primary, secondary, higher secondary in one complex, so that there is familiarity with the whole system for young children who have transitional issues. And we know children with disabilities transit very poorly from lower to upper primary, and then to by the time they reach higher secondary, there's very few, 1/4 of them actually reaching. So we have chapter 8, and that's the 8.5 C and D, school standard setting authority, and that will be at the state level, and a school qualification assessment and accreditation framework for each school. And that will be, then there'll be Parak, it's a performance assessment and generally knowledge and holistic development organization, which will develop even tools for checking SLD and guidelines for teaching them. Next one. This is chapter 4, which is very important. It's the largest chapter, and 75% of it is very good for persons with disabilities. 4.1, 4.6 to 7, and continuously from 41 to 44. The first point I want to talk about is a national curriculum framework for school education, in which all ministries, including our Ministry of Social Justice, Department of Disability, and the National Institutes, will be involved. Second is the flexibility part. There will be no hard barriers between curricular, co-curricular, arts, sports, the integration across the different subjects. And of course, ISL, the Indian Sign Language, will be universalized. Then I go to testing. There's a big reform there. We're going to test only conceptual understanding and application. Just as in the curriculum, there will be flexibility in choosing what subjects you want between art, science, etc. So too, in the testing from class 8 onwards, students can choose what they want to be tested in. I mean, that's amazing. Then there will be semester pattern of tests twice a year, and tests in class 3, 5 and 8. Of course, board exams in 10 and 12. But the report card, there's a 360-degree report card which looks at all areas of child development. That's amazing. And after a particular class, there will be self-assessment as well as peer assessment. How amazing that is, and that will be very good for all of us. Next slide, please. Okay, this is very important within chapter 4 pedagogy, vocationalization of education. In class 6 onwards, we will be exposing children to at least one vocational mastery and general exposure to 2 or 3. So all of us who now are still making diyas and packs and papers will actually have very standardized vocational training qualifications within the school framework from class 6 onwards. So how particularly good that will be. It will also develop in the child a sense of dignity for labor. Next slide. Okay, no, I've done this. Please, yeah. So I'm talking about 4 E's: equity, enrollment, enablement, and empowerment, and 7 A's, which are very well reflected in this policy. A for access, attendance, aptitude, attitude, accessibility, affordability, and accountability. So, what are the major shifts which have implications for persons with disability? There are 4 areas actually, but I'm only going to be talking about 2. One is approach, and the other is the teaching learning process. In the approach, the whole content is shifting from what to teach to what to learn to how to learn, the application of the learning ability. And that's very good for us because we have issues with children going up to the higher classes in terms of curricular access. And then in the a la carte menu, the subject and multiple exit points. No learning will be lost, either in school education or in higher education, because all learning will be stored digitally. We can exit and come back anytime without losing credits. Then in the teaching learning process, there is pedagogy. Huge emphasis on inclusive pedagogies, not only for teachers, but also in the teaching learning of the teachers at the teacher education institution. Emphasis on experiential learning, perfect for us, particularly for children with autism. Technology for children with visual, hearing, and other particular disabilities. Report cards I've mentioned, but most of all, peer assessment. This is going to reflect also in the teacher's preparation time how to use technology, how to use peers for teaching and learning. Next slide, please. Okay, in the state government, there's going to be separation of responsibility, and this is going to be very good for us. First, a department, state department, to look at policy making. Second, Directorate of Education to look after operations. Third, SART for academics. Fourth, State School Standards Authority to set minimal standards for online self-disclosure by all schools, both public and private, same parameters, and all other existing activities continue. And as you know, education is no longer MHRD, it is back to Ministry of Education. Next one. Role of teachers. And as I'm trying to show in this slide how it has moved from a Guru Shiksha, few students, to many more students, and now to digital learning. Next slide. Okay, the role of special educators. Chapter 5 is entirely about teachers, and I'm going to talk first about special educators. 5.21, all of you out there who are special educators, please note, there is an urgent need for additional special educators for certain areas of school education. Some examples are specialist requirements for teaching Divyang children at the middle and secondary schools. Now, it adds a caveat: such teachers must have subject knowledge. Now, most of our teachers in ID and CP and ASD don't have subject teaching knowledge, although I've been talking about it for so many years. But now RCI, I'm sure, will have developed modules which are specific for subject teaching. Next slide. Okay, what is RCI? Does RCI get a mention? Yes. Once RCI is mentioned in, again, 5.21, same paragraph. Greater synergy will be enabled between the course curriculum of NCTE and RCI to ensure adequate availability of qualified special educators who can handle subject teaching as well. Next slide. Okay, come to the teacher. A lot is said about how to improve the stature of the teacher. She must or he must get back to being the most important person in society. So this policy wants to look at their livelihood and how they can bring back a lot of respect, dignity, and autonomy to the teacher. At the same time, maintain control and accountability. Next slide, please. Okay, many important things. Service conditions will improve learning environment. How the teacher is going to bring about an inclusive learning environment. Also, technology will be part of teaching also. I'm sure Alka will handle that. 4-year integrated B.Ed will be the minimal requirement after 2030. And also scholarships, jobs, going to provide housing in the rural areas so teachers stay back in the same place where they live. Now, that's a huge issue. I'll come back to that later. There will be vertical mobility. Good teachers will be rewarded. They will going up. Their administrative work will be reduced, and they will become members of SMC. But at the same time, they will be incentivized for doing good work. So they can become master trainers if they're very good at their job. Next. Okay. Caring and inclusive autonomy I've mentioned. Now, CPD, which is professional development for 50 hours per year for all teachers and for principals. And there will be, by 2022, a national professional standard for teachers. Next one. We're moving, next slide please. We're moving to assessment of learning outcomes, and that's why this is very good for our children, because so far there has been presence in the classroom but very little attention to whether they are actually learning or not learning. So learning outcomes becomes a huge issue here, and I'm coming towards the end, so setting the stage for Poonam. Socially and economically disadvantaged groups called the SEDGs, and there are 4 of them. One is socio-cultural, like minority, also geographical, they're very rural areas, gender, and disability. So we have to bring about social justice, and these groups, SEDGs, will be given very special attention in this policy so that they flourish from early childhood to higher education. Next. Direct mention of disability, yes, they call children with disability, differently abled children, Divyangjan, but most often they will be called children with special needs, so that their participation becomes a priority. And this is a big change from the earlier education policy. Next one, please. Should be finishing soon. Next. Yes. So the role of special schools, and I want to mention this particularly. Are they called special schools? No. They're called alternative forms of school, because they found that very few people from these higher special schools are actually going to higher education, 6.15. So now we come to promoting what they're already doing. Their traditional alternative pedagogies will be encouraged, but they'll get assistance, and for the meritorious students from them, they will be facilitated for higher education. So what will they get assistance for? Next slide, please. They'll get assistance for teaching, training of their teachers in inclusive pedagogies, in subject teaching, and in following the same learning outcomes as other students. So part of this, children will continue to do what they were doing earlier, but for those who can, learning outcomes according to the national framework on school education will be promoted. Next slide, please. So these are the new frameworks: early childhood framework, reduced curriculum load in school education, NSQF from class 6, this is for skills qualification, Parak I've mentioned, and there will be school quality assessment and accreditation. And now my last slide, please. So while it is the responsibility of all of us, since this is a Parivar sponsored, organized, I want to mention that parents are mentioned in 1.3, guidelines for parents 0 to 3 years. They're mentioned in 8.3 because they've seen that parents are being exploited to pay very huge fees. But the most important point is 8.9, where they want to make the public education system so that it becomes the most attractive option for parents. And also, whatever learning material will be developed will be shared with the parents. Last slide, next. So inclusive and equitable education, which is what Parivar will be promoting for, in its own right, a good idea, subject, but also it will promote inclusive and equitable societies. Thank you very much. I will answer questions later, if any. And I'm sorry for the glitches that I've made you suffer.
Thank you, Alokadi. You've really taken us very methodically through the NEP 2020. The structure of it, you have dealt with in such a short time really so well, right? Starting from the early education, which is for parents. Thank you for stressing wherever the parents come in and what they need to look out for. And also for pointing out for the teaching, for special educators, where their role will change, and also those of NGOs who are giving special education. Also very interesting about the vocational education. Thank you so much once again.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
Thanks. We now come to our second speaker, Dr. Poonam Natarajan. Dr. Natarajan has been the chairperson of the National Trust from 2006 to October 2014. During this tenure, she embarked on a number of innovative and path-breaking programs, among which the Niramaya Health Insurance stands out. She founded Vidyasagar Center for Children and Adults with Developmental Disabilities in Chennai in 1985. After the birth of her son with high support needs in 1981, she trained from the Spastic Society of India, Mumbai, and claims that her son was her guru. Madam Natarajan has over 14 awards in disability. She has received the UNESCO Asia Pacific Disability Rights Champions Award 2012 and is presently working on setting up the Resource Center for Living Independently in the Community. It's called BLISS, Begin to Live Independently with Support Systems for Adults with Disability. Poonamji, request you now to speak on the new structure of inclusive education for persons with intellectual and developmental disability and the required capacity building. Over to you, Poonamji.
Hi, good evening, Iona. Good evening, everybody in Parivar. It's a real pleasure to be here and to talk about inclusive education. Thank you, Aloka. I loved your presentation, and I think you very well actually set the tone for the entire national education policy. Let me just share my presentation with you. So the national education policy is is a vision document, really. I think what it can help us to do is to make a roadmap for ourselves as parents, as teachers, as stakeholders, as people with disabilities in the sector. How do we use this vision document? What do we advocate for? And how do we take it forward? So, I think it's very important. Okay. Okay. So, well, mm, in the last 30 years, we have been trying to do inclusive education. And so many, there's been integrated education, there's been inclusive education. So many different methods have been tried, different things have been tried. And to my mind, we really haven't succeeded in inclusive education. And there are small islands of good practice, but we really haven't got there yet as far as uh, all our children are quite invisible still in the school systems. They're not really included in the private schools. And so I think it's an exciting time. Let's see how we can use all this new way of thinking that Aloka was talking about, that is in the national education policy. How can we use it to really take forward our goals of inclusive education, especially for children with intellectual, intellectual and developmental disabilities. So, so many things have changed, and I think they have been put forward very nice in Aloka's presentation. But let me start with the first two that have changed. So, the first thing that is very important for us is the new policy talks about not of 6 years to 14 years, but 3 years to 18 years. Now that's great because for a long time we've been talking about early childhood care and education to be part of the system. And it was not. Actually, there is just not very much for children in our country. So this new ECCE, which we have been campaigning for years, coming in the NEP, is a great step forward. And the change in the structure, the 5 plus 3 plus 3 plus 4 instead of the 10 plus 2 is also very important because it suddenly divides the education system in a in a nice way. And especially, let's take the first 5 years, because I think for our inclusive education, especially for intellectual and developmental disabilities, all the all the four rungs are important, but the first 5 years, 3 years to 6 years, and 6 to 8 years are certainly the most vital. And this is the ECCE, which we have been talking about, which is a big new addition. And, in the fundamental principles, they are, they talk a lot, the policy talks about equity and not just equality, equity, and it talks about inclusion, and it talks about all students thriving in the education system. So that's an important principle which we should really use to see how our children, they have been in the Anganwadi system in some states, they are not there in other states. It's a kind of a, it's not really that complete our children are included in the Anganwadi system. But this 3 to 6 years now is going to have the Anganwadi system, it's going to have the Bal Vatikas at 5 years as a preparatory class, it's going to have private schools. And therefore, I think it's got a lot of space. It's going good for our children to be included. First of all, the most important thing is that as since, like Alok was saying, it is the NCRT which is going to make the pedagogical framework. Now we need to really make sure. We know that most of the curricula, it resonates with the early intervention program, but we really need to make sure that our children with such diverse abilities, they get the kind of support they need, which is so well promised in national education policy, that they do get this diversified, multidisciplinary inputs. They're looking at all domains of development. We do hope that at the preschool level, all these domains get really, really get supported. Because till now, we have seen in the Anganwadi's education system very, very inappropriate systems. So basically, it has been, inappropriate songs. Now we're talking about our own cultural heritage, but earlier the songs were very westernized. They made no sense about blue eyes and fair skin and curly locks, and it made no sense to child in that Anganwadi. So I think it's high time we get our own kind of a curricula, and this will really help our children um, to get included into the system, into a robust system as it promises to be, and so that they can go up into the other 3+3+4 in a much more well orchestrated way. Let's see how this happens. But I have great hopes with the ECCE really being the fundamental support, which is most important for our children with intellectual disabilities. And we must ensure that there is total inclusion of all our children of 3 years and above in the ECCE programs, especially in the Balvatikas. I know there is full functional literacy and numeracy. I mean, there's a whole idea that reading, which has been reading in numbers, which actually many children, even when they go to higher classes, have not achieved this. There is the aim to achieve that now in NEP, and that's a great way forward. And I just do hope that we can get that done. So what else has changed? I think what we need to remember, the NEP talks about, you see in the art, it actually dilutes the RTE to a large extent. The RTE and its EVS, the living from the weaker sections, all that in private schools is not mentioned. But the RTE talked about the neighborhood school. The RTE talked about also home-based education, which has been quite, home-based education, of course, has been very, very, very disappointing. It's almost not there. So and then came the RPWD, where we made sure that we did not talk about home-based education because it's quite counterproductive to children with disabilities, especially. So RPWD talks about a choice, an option between special schools and the mainstream school or the neighborhood school. NEP in turn it looks at all three. It talks about the special school, it talks about the mainstream school or the main school, and it talks about home-based education. But most important of all, it recognizes the provisions of inclusive education under the rights of people with disabilities. And I think these are important to remember from the idea of ECCE, and as we go up on the ladder of the classes, that this, what has been talked about in the rights of people with disabilities, is something that they are saying they will ensure, which of course starts with non-discrimination in schools. Got admission. Not many kids with disabilities get admission. There's a lot of advocacy, a lot of cajoling, a lot of waiting outside the principal's office. We've all done it. We've done it again and again and again for our children. And now there is going to be non-discrimination in areas in the school, like now that they're talking about not hard separations between education, sports, and recreation. So we are going to have uh, um, children will be able to seamlessly move through all these different activities. We're talking about accessible infrastructure. Not only 28% of schools have accessible infrastructure in this country at the moment. So when we talk about the building, the campus, facilities like water, toilets, libraries, all these which have been specially named in the RPWD, they are saying that they will ensure that it is there. They talk about reasonable accommodation according to a person's requirements. And that's important because all the time our children have had to drop out. We know that the dropout rate in the mainstream schools of children with disabilities is one of the highest because they have said, no, the mother must sit with the child, no, there must be an attendant the parent should pay for, no, the transport is not possible. All these accommodations are now promised in the NEP. And if that really happens, then great, thumbs up, our children will get there. It also, we have the individualized supports to maximize academic and social development. And I think I really want to, everybody you talk to about inclusive education says, it's all right about academics, but socialization happens. They keep on again and again talking about socialization. But now that I've been working on independent living in the community, I find that the socialization and inclusive schools is a big myth. And I want to talk about that later because as parents, as teachers, as workers, development workers in the field, inclusive education must look at social development of our children also. I'm sorry it hasn't looked so far. There are small little murmurs of it in the NEP, and let's hope that really happens. RPWD also talks about Braille and use of ISL, which is great, a lot of talk on ISL. And of course, AAC, other means of communication, languages, which have not been mentioned in the NEP, but that's okay. I guess it'll come. And uh, the RPWD talks about, being able to quickly detect the specific learning disabilities at the earliest, training teachers. I think the training of teachers, special educators, really, really needs to be rethought of because they're most inappropriately trained and have not been able to really make a difference. A special educator trained on one subject, on one disability, suddenly is the expert in a classroom of 40. It doesn't resonate. I do hope this cross disability training that they're talking about happens, and also that the special educator that she's going to support the school, the mainstream school, understands her role. And her role is not about pulling out kids and teaching them, but how does she actually support children within the classroom? And how do the classroom teacher actually, how she doesn't feel as if she's equipped to work with these children. Most of the, so many schools I've been to, she'll say, well, they have to be here, but I don't have to show any outcomes. That's the way she works at the moment. But for her to really appreciate the capacities of children with disabilities, the training really needs to be overhauled, and a different message has to be given, and a different way of teaching has to be given. And that's what NEP is promising us. I don't know, we still depend on NCRT and RCI to make the uh, very, very important jumps and changes and come forward with strategies. And that's where we need to advocate with them and ensure that they do that. The RPWD also talks about monitoring participation, looking at progress in terms of attainment levels and completion of education in respect of every student with disability. And completion of education very rarely happens. Of course, the NEP, we are much more hopeful because the examination system is going to change, as Alokta was saying, and it's going to be much more easier, and the exams in the third, fifth, and eighth standard might help our children to get a certificate, even if they cannot go forward and move on to some vocational training or whatever. The transport and attendance for children with disabilities, we do hope becomes part of the uh, mm, uh, NEP when they really go out there and start really ensuring that all parts of NEP are really implemented on the ground. That's the biggest challenge. And let's see how that happens. But we need to actually be very clear that parents should not agree to be the attendant. Attendant and transport is the state's responsibility, and the state must ensure that children get these supports. It talks about reasonable accommodation. It talks that it's very happy with the RPWD norms, so it should do it. The other is to train and employ teachers, including teachers with disabilities. I don't think there's any talk of teachers with disabilities in the NEP, who have qualified in sign language and braille, and also teachers who know how to teach children with intellectual disabilities. Train professionals and staff to support inclusive education at all levels, and also disability awareness. So these are some of the things that the rights of people with disabilities is talking about, which NEP has agreed to take cognizance of and to actually implement. So we are very hopeful that that happens. So besides that, what are the other great and important changes from the disability lens? Many of them have already been enumerated by Aloka earlier, but let's just go through some of these, which are very, very important for us as advocates of inclusive education. If inclusive education has to succeed, it is you and I, all of us together, parents, teachers, and everybody who have to really make it happen. And so this is a document for us to use as a vision document so that we can really build that roadmap. Because this is not a law, this is not a rule or a regulation. This is a vision document. It has to become a practice. And so one great idea that the important changes from the disability lens is talking about school dropouts and getting them back into school and finding multiple pathways for them to learn. And these pathways are what we're talking about, that no hard divisions between the curricular, co-curricular, and extracurricular, sports, art, drama, music, dance, and the academic subjects, teaching concepts through all these activities. Very much what we do in special schools is what they're talking about, and help children grow. And I think I'm going to put my money in that if we can actually make our schools, or between science and arts and culture, all these hard divisions, either you study arts or science, but you can actually choose your subjects. You can do you can do what you are good at. I think is going to be a great step forward for inclusive education. And this, I think, will help our children to go on from class to class and maybe choose other subjects in which they are good at. Most important thing is and I think this system may help what the years of education has not helped children to do. And it has not helped even all of us who went through the school system. It took us many years to understand where our strengths lay. Unless we were the mugports who mugged up and came first in school, then you knew you were a rote learner and you could very well be part of the system. But if you were not, then you had to look for your other strengths and how to use those strengths to find yourself a job, a career, and a fulfillment in life. But here where I can, explore my strengths, look at my weaknesses through this curricular, co-curricular, extracurricular, being blending seamlessly seems like a great idea to me in inclusive education. I hope and pray that it works, because that's what's going to really help us. In the fundamental principles, they are talking about technology, extensive use of technology, and especially mention the people with disabilities. They call it Divyang, a word that is not very well appreciated, but yes, it is there for children with disabilities. And therefore, technology, which is now just boomeranging and going forward so fast, I do hope it does help us in inclusive education. They have this Diksha, digital infrastructure for knowledge sharing. And I think this whole idea of trying to use, I don't know how well an online education is going to help our children. I don't think it does to some extent, but I don't think it's the answer forward. But much we know that technology is so many different types of technology, certainly our children will benefit in the inclusive classrooms if technology is used, if the smart class comes in, as they say, and if a lot of products are available. Then there is the peer tutoring. Good, nice idea, and I hope it works, but I don't know. It doesn't always work. We're not, we're a little difficult at times. Libraries in villages. Wow, that's like a dream. And I do hope I can see when I next go on my rural work that their libraries come up with the third, fifth, and eighth standard. And of course, there are very many other innovative ideas as you go up in the class 6 to 8. There is this thing called the bagless days, when children will not carry their bag, but will have work and go and observe uh, the gardener or the potter or the farmer or an industry. And I think those are important days. And in fact, 10 days in 2 years of 6, 7, 8, or 3 years, I don't think is enough. I think there should be many, many more bagless days where children can really go out there and get more experience, especially for our children who, as they go up, I would recommend more bagless days. And of course, vocational training is a big thing that's being talked about. I think Aloka said it starts at class 6. Maybe I made a mistake and said class 9. But well, that's a big area as far as our kids are concerned, because we know that once vocational training is there within the school curriculum, we may see more children staying back in school, we may see more children finishing school, and we may see more children more visible in the mainstream schools, which they are not right now. The other very innovative idea is the aspirational districts, because we know that when we look at our work, the special schools at the there are about 300 districts in this country which have no services for people with intellectual developmental disabilities. And more than 300, I don't know the exact number now, but it was about 320 districts when I was at the National Trust. And so I think it's really important that they have thought of these special education zones, and that we have these aspirational districts. And I hope more money is put in, and we have more, and children have a greater advantage there. And of course, the socioeconomic disadvantaged groups that they talk about, where disability is one of them. Disabled children come from all groups, whether it's scheduled castes or OBCs or scheduled tribes or girl children. So disability is everywhere, but disability is always the last, even in these groups. So getting our children with disabilities out there into schools through this kind of focus strategies perhaps will work. Let's see how it happens. And we look forward to that. And now the basic thing is the school education is going to be through home-based education, through special schools, and through the regular schools. So how do we look at home-based? Home-based education till now has not had anything at all. We've just done a white paper on home-based education, and it's been very, very, very disappointing. It's almost dismal. They get nobody, they're just left out there. So now they're talking about it actually will it be, I don't know how they're going to do this with RPWD, which really talks about accessible infrastructure, but they're saying they will look at RPWD norms to do HPE. So I don't know how it happens. But of course, we don't, home-based education can be an option, but a very rare option it should be, because our children in any case have what the big issue is: social isolation. And home-based education creates more social isolation. So I wouldn't really go for it. And I think RPWD did the right thing by ignoring HPE. But let's see what they do and whether some kind of synergy is created for home-based education to actually happen. We also have the, I don't know how this works as far as the special schools are concerned. How will they be regulated? Are they going to be part of MSJ still, or are they going to become part of Ministry of Education? So there's no clear guidelines on that. And children coming from special schools, are they going to get all these support systems? Because they will not be part of Ministry of Education. So I don't know. This whole thing is still very, in my mind, I have not yet understood how it's going to work. But I do hope we can that some kind of recognition for children in special schools. They can be there for 15, 20 years and get no certificate at the end of it. And I don't think they are included in the building up of the vibrant institutions of excellence. So I think that inclusion is needed as far as the special schools are concerned. And I just want to end with my the project that I have started to work at now, because of my years at the National Trust, is on interdependent living in the community. And we're trying to build these support systems. Now, I'm not going to talk to you about the 9 pillars that we are building up, but except about one pillar, which we call the trust-enabled decision-making with support systems. All parents want to build a trust and leave their money, their little pot of money for their children in that trust. And they want to have trustees who will support this child after their lifetime, who as an adult with disabilities. Now, what does this child has to bring with him? All the learnings from the inclusive education system. But when we talk, the first thing about, if you just look at the stereotype trust, I don't think it's going to work with really creating support systems in the community. So we want a circle of friends. We want a support circle, which can be part of the legal trust to help people with intellectual and developmental disabilities to have enough support. But when you actually start working on this, you're working with people who've been to inclusive schools, but they have not got a support circle. Meaning the socialization I talked about earlier has totally failed. Children with disabilities are not able to make friends. Support circles come from friends and friendships. And we say inclusive education is for socialization. But I'm sorry, it has not worked. We will have to work on strategies where we break these walls between the able-bodied, non-disabled, and children with disabilities so that they can work together and become friends. Sustainable relationships can develop, because only then can we actually look at the next step of adults leading a fulfilled, happy life. And not saying, when you ask them, who do you go to make a decision? And they say, I can only go to my mother or father. But they have other people in the community. And I would look at that as a goal of inclusive education. Because inclusion or inclusive education has to resonate with adult life, which is for the next 40 years, whether from 18 years to 65 or 70 or whatever. And that's a way of life. It's not a part-time job. So I do hope the NEP, I think we have to remember again and again, is not a law, it's not a rule, it's not a regulation. It's a pathway, it's a vision. And I do hope it helps us to make a roadmap to take our children forward so that as adults, they become more and more complete in themselves. They have those support systems where parents are not worried about who will look after them once they're no more, and that children can lead a fulfilling lives as adults with disabilities. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Poonamji. Thank you for giving us an insight into what has changed in the inclusive education program. Especially taking us through in detail the early education, care and education, for taking us through the disability from the disability lens perspective. It sounds so interesting about the importance of technology, peer tutoring, libraries in the neighborhood, and also for bringing to us the, where the advocacy is needed, and the question mark on home-based education, where you very rightly spoke about socialization being very important for children with disabilities. We wish you all the best for your Project Bliss, and thank you once again for your wonderful presentation.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Thank you.
We next come to our third and fourth speaker, who will be both speaking on the prospects of education and higher education for youngsters with intellectual disability. The first would be Dr. Alka Naizami. She's the clinical psychologist, PhD from Central Institute of Psychiatry, Ranchi. She's the founder member and director of academics of Deepshika Institute of Child Development and Mental Health, the premier center in Jharkhand. Dr. Naizami has published many research papers in national and international journals, and she has had more than 30 years of experience in child mental health. Dr. Naizami is the recipient of various state and national awards. And along with her, we will have Dr. Alok Kumar Bhuvan, who's the specialist in rehabilitation science and special education. After qualifying as a professional, he started Manu Vikas for the intellectually disabled. The turning point came when he was selected in an exchange program with Japan for vocational rehabilitation and employment of persons with disabilities, and started similar work here. His endeavors were recognized by IGNU and later CBSE. With media exposure, he has established corporate and industry links for placement of persons with disability in suitable and good jobs. Dr. Bhuvan has taken every opportunity given by RCI and National Trust to start training programs and manpower development, and has been highly recognized for the same. He has been given the National Trust Award as Best Professional and numerous excellence awards. So over to you both. First, Dr. Naizami, followed by Dr. Bhuvan. Over. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Iona. Good evening, everyone. At the outset, I thank the organizers, especially Ajinda and Sumanda, for giving me this opportunity to be with you all. Alokadi and Poonamdi already have discussed in length and in such a beautiful way what national education policy focuses on. I would like my presentation to be shown. Screen sharing. Hello. Aruna, can you share the screen? Iona, is he there? Am I audible? Yeah.
Just a minute, just a minute.
Yeah.
He's coming.
You're audible to us. We're just phoning Aruna's sister. Yeah, okay. He's just organizing it. Just
yes, yes.
Dr. Naizami, please.
Yeah, sure.
Yes, madam, I'm sharing. Just a minute.
Yeah. My topic today focus on prospects of higher education for youngsters with intellectual disability, part of which will be covered by Dr. Alok Bhuvan. And I just take 10 minutes. Next slide, please. Next, please. Hello.
নেক্সট স্লাইড দিতে বলছে, নেক্সট স্লাইড দিতে বলছে।
Yeah, we all know for higher education to be achieved, there are certain prerequisites. Completion of basic schooling up to secondary level is important. And I just want here to talk about recent report of UNESCO 2019, which states even though India has made considerable progress in improving enrollment rates of children with disabilities in school, however, significant gap remains. 75% of children with disabilities do not attend schools in India. Next, yeah. Number of enrolled children dropped significantly with each successive level of schooling. Fewer girls with disability are in school than boys. Most of the children with disabilities are enrolled at higher secondary school in NIOS rather than going to mainstream. Even in NIOS, there is decline in enrollment between 2019 to 2015, and percentage of children attending school is lowest among those with multiple disability and mental retardation. Next. The perceived barriers we all know are low societal expectation, which includes parents, family, community, attitudes of teachers, poor accessibility, lack of assistive and ICT technology devices, lack of specific financial allocation for our children, lack of appropriate student support mechanism, lack of knowledge of higher education opportunities, and poor employability potential. Next. When it comes to national education, higher education in National Education Policy 2020, it significantly accepts that higher education significantly contributes to sustainable livelihood and economical development. NEP 2020 envisions a complete overhaul and energizing of the higher education system. It recognizes that gross enrollment ratio in 2017-18 in higher education was 25.8% only. Now it aims to increase to 50% by year 2035. Next. For this to happen, that there is a need of restructuring higher education institutions. It can be done by transforming these institutions into multidisciplinary universities or colleges and higher education institute clusters or knowledge hubs. It talks of research intensive universities or teaching intensive universities and autonomous degree granting colleges. It aims to have one large multidisciplinary higher education institute in or near every district by 2030. Higher education institutes will have option to run open distance learning and online programs too. Higher education sector has to be an integrated system which includes professional and vocational education. Next. Proposed structure for higher education is during undergraduate degrees can be either 3 or 4 year duration with multiple exit option. One can get certificate after completing 1 year, diploma after 2 years, bachelor degree after 3 years. However, preferred option will be 4 years, whereas last year will be degree with research. Next. For master programs, higher education institutes will have flexibility. They can run 2-year programs, whereas second year will be devoted to research for those completing 3 years bachelor degree, or can have 1-year master program for student completing 4-year bachelor with research, or one can opt for 5 years integrated bachelor master program. One can get enrolled in PhD after a master degree or a 4-year bachelor degree with research. MPhil will be discontinued. Next. When it comes to opportunities of higher education, students with disabilities and in national education policy, as it was explained earlier, this policy is committed to equity and inclusion in higher education too. The approach is common across the school and higher education. It talks about continuity across the level and has taken many policy initiatives. It emphasizes experiences in the full range of holistic and multidisciplinary education for children, for youngsters with disabilities also, and an academic bank of credit is stored. The academic credit earns from various programs or subjects. Next. For this to happen, various steps need to be taken by government. They have to earmark suitable fund for education of a student with disabilities. They commit in the policy they are committing and enhance access by establishing more high quality institutes in aspirational district, which Poonamdi was talking, or special education zones. They are also talking about financial assistance and scholarship, because many times many of the children cannot achieve it, cannot pursue higher education for lack of financial resources. They talks about developing and supporting technology tools for better participation and learning outcomes, conduct outreach on higher education opportunities and scholarship, make people aware about it, make admission process as well as curriculum more inclusive, and increase the employability potential of higher education program. Next. Higher education institutes also need to take certain concrete steps. They need to ensure all buildings and facilities are wheelchair accessible and disabled friendly. They need to develop bridge courses for students that come from disadvantaged education backgrounds. Need to provide social, emotional, and academic support and mentoring for all such students through suitable counseling and mentoring programs. It also talks of sensitizing faculty, counselors, students on disability and its inclusion in all aspects of higher education institutes, including curriculum. It talks of strictly enforcing non-discrimination and anti-harassment rule. Next. NEP also talks about reimagining vocational education, as it recognizes that at present currently less than 5% individuals in 19 to 24 years of age range receives any formal vocational education. It aims to offer vocational education up to 50% of the total enrollment in higher educational institute by 2025, which may be good if our youngsters make to the college. All learners from we know already have told that told by Alokadi will receive from grade 9 to 12 vocational education in at least one vocation, and it also talks of integrating vocational education at undergraduate level in all high Education Institute over a span of 10 years. Next. Next. One thing which is very, I found, which may be of quite use to our youngsters who have already reached adulthood and have not had any formal training or education, the thing which NEP mentions in its adult education. India has over 3.2 crore youths as non-literates. NEP recommends establishing Central Institute of Adult Learning Education under a unit of NCERT. 5 areas which are suggested are foundational literacy and numeracy, life skills like financial literacy, digital literacy, commercial skills, health awareness programs, skills, child care skills, etc. Vocational skill development is also included with a view to obtain local employment. Basic education, which can go up to secondary stage equivalent in adult education, and continuing education in art, science, sports, recreation, the thing which is very, very important. I think this is vocational, inclusion of vocational and adult education in NEP is something we all have to work to do advocacy for our youngsters. Issues especially related to person with intellectual disabilities now will be taken by Dr. Alok Gohar with his immense experience and active participation in the field. I am sure he will do justice to the topic. Over to Alok. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Justice तो आप लोग ही कर रहे हैं ना, and I feel everyone, all the speakers are my gurus, and मैं गुरु के सामने नतमस्तक हूँ. So thank you परिवार for giving me opportunity. Good evening, Aloka Guha ma'am, so namaskar, and Poonam ma'am, namaskar, and thank you Alka ma'am for giving me the opportunity. This opportunity comes from you only. So okay, I have seen that मैं थोड़ा सा आलोका गुहा मैम का I have missed some presentation, but okay, so I am presenting you something which is very important and related to the higher education perspective. And if we go through that concern for the disability community, and which is available in NEP 2020, is there is a phase. There are two phases is very important, and if we see the 2030 phase is that to prepare huge number of student strength, and there we need to put our persons with students with disability there, because that the government is preparing a number of persons, number of students should go to the higher education between 20 to 2030. So here we are lacking, because as Madam Alka ma'am has pointed out, without the secondary education we can't make the student, prepare the student for the higher education. So at least 10 years time we have, 20 to 2030. Here we can put all the energy to prepare especially our student with intellectual and developmental disability to pass secondary education at least. And 2040 of this NEP is the ensuring the visualization of participation of student with disability in the multidisciplinary community. So all the results of NEP in the higher education, in the terms of higher education, we'll find our student with disabilities are coming into the college or going into the college. We can find out many students are going into the mainstream college or somewhere by 2040. So the gross enrollment in the terms of person with disability, we will find out. So at this moment, we'll say this is 0.02% is the gross enrollment, and maybe it has raised by 2020. It is in 2018, it is 0.02%. And by 2035, at least as per the NEP slot or NEP variations, we can see at least 5% persons with intellectual and developmental disability should go into the college by 2035. So this is how, and what I'm finding as last 20 years I'm working in this sector, and then I'm finding there is a very much three basic gap. Is the one issue is moving into the job where they have to work alongside the person without disability. That kind of skills is missing with our student with disability. So the college or the higher education, if it will make something is the job oriented program or job oriented course or the employable skill course, there that skill can be solved out. And also I'm finding there's a very low societal expectations that foster the job discrimination. Even the parents, even the society, even the community, and everybody has made the little less expectations from the students. कहीं ना कहीं प्रोटेक्शन ज्यादा हो रहा है. So if we give the opportunity to our students, if we give the very much you know options to the students, the choice to the students, then these expectations can be minimized, and there they can choose their career and they can go ahead. And the third basic point I'm finding, the skill assessment is somehow is lacking. The reasonable job accommodations ke bare mein baat hai, reasonable accommodations is there in the NEP, but where is the best practices comes? If we don't have the best practices, so we will not able to find out many more solutions. So I'll just share you something which we have done something so far for higher education of especially those who are the intellectual and developmental disabilities at Manovikas. The program name is the Think College. We are doing the Think College program, and basic element of this Think College program is that some job and some element of economic empowerment that determines the self-esteem of people with people in society. And such is the case of case with the intellectual and developmental delay too. So here we are finding in Think College program something we have to, some course or some program we have to think which has the economic empowerment elements, and also something which increase the self-esteem of our student with intellectual and developmental disability. So this is the basic idea about the Think College program. And then the key components of this Think College program is, so far we have got the many kind of government affiliation with the open universities, with the open schooling and iOS open schools, the CBSE, and we have also got the accreditation for the from the AICT, All India Council for Technical Education, especially in the case in the terms of intellectual and developmental disabilities. So the whole Think College program is not running the Manovikas program. We are running the program of CBSE, NIOS, IGNO, AICT. So that's why it has the some basic components of giving the certification, the certification which works in the market, which is very much sellable in the market. And I'll give you the how we are doing, and I'll quote here some success story, very small success story, one slides, and then you will able to understand. Otherwise, I have given you here the links, the skill.manovikas.family or thinkcollege.manovikas.family. There you can find out all the details. I'll just quote you here some how we are going through the Think College program. And she is a Shraddha, and I have taken all the permission from our students to talk about their success stories. And Shraddha, she came at Manovikas while she was in class 3rd, and through the OBE program, we had made something home science or art and craft or painting kind of subject for her study. See, this is from the 3rd or 8th grade, means OBE level, open basic education level A or B or C. There are the components of skilling components, the vocational components. We took that vocational subject, and she passed the 10th class or 12th class successfully from NIOS. And I'll tell you how where she is going. And I'll give you the one more example of CBSE. The CBSE has the skill knowledge program where the student can take the two skill subjects. I'm saying the vocational subject as well as the skill subject under the NSQF. Madam Aloka Gohar was pointing that NSQF component. So NSQF, National Skill Qualification Framework, it starts from class, it starts from the class 8th onward, the 8th onward, any student can choose the skill component course, the skill development programs, or in hospitality or retail or IT or anything, and they can study from 8, 9, 10th, 11th, 12th. And she is the Gaurangi. Now she is doing the bachelor in hospitality training, hospitality management training. She was the part of CBSE school program, and from 8th class onward, we have taken her in the skilling components in the hospitality training kind of things. So वो 8th class में भी hospitality पढ़ी, then in the 9th she went through the hospitality training, 10th she went through the hospitality training, 11th, 12th, and thereafter when she joined the Manipal University, she has no problem. She has the disability in even the some kind of speech related disability and intellectual disability, mild level of intellectual disability also. So now she is in Manipal University, but there is a very much inclusively she is going on, and there is a no problem. So even from the CBSE school, the student can go to the mainstream school, and thereafter the Sardha, after passing the NIOS 12th class from the NIOS, she took the admission in the IGNOS program, and she is going through the masters in, I think she is doing the bachelor in art, and she is in second year. And how she has passed, see this, you can see this is she is doing BA, and once she gone through the secondary education in NIOS, then she chose the IGNO programs, and now she is doing the bachelor degree program. And Manovikas has, since so many years we have started developing all these things. We have the three kind of students. One, students those who are in a special school without any formal education. So there we take this first line of this action, first line, this one. So the person can join. We have the skill development program of under the NSQF, National Skill Qualification Framework, and that persons, they got the OBE level for the RPL, then they took the NSQF level 3, 4, and I have written here the NSQF level 1 and 2 is equivalent to the grade 9 and 10th class. So even from the special education special school, the student can choose the vocational programs and they can go up to the bachelor level. So at this moment at Manovikas, we have the higher education credit based degree diploma education level, NSQF level 5. So suppose one student who pass NSQF level 5 in hospitality, so now they have the chance to go to the direct to the bachelor degree program of IGNO. So there are so many options are available to going to the higher education. We have to choose the proper direction from where we start. And even in the second case, in the green area, if the person has at least 8th class education somehow, so they can choose that the skill development program, and then again they can go. And I have already quoted here those who are studying in the mainstream school, they can also choose here from the level 3 and 4, and they can go to the mainstream school. So if we have kind of some kind of model, then we can make the persons go into the mainstream school. See, Abha, she's the lady, she's the girl, she's a lady, and she did all qualification from the Manovikas, open basic education, then 10th and 12th, and she did the masters. Now she is doing the master's degree in social work. She did the 12th class, then thereafter from 12th she did the D.Ed special education at Manovikas. Now, and then also she did the BSW program, Bachelor in Social Work program from the IGNO, and then she is doing the Masters in Social Work from the IGNO. So this is the how, if we have kind of programs, then we can take it. And how we are doing this is a very important part at Manovikas is we find out that मनुष्य जो है दो तरीके से वो अनुगामी होता है, that trailing through the two things, the presentation, the prastuti. So how we are presenting the persons, how we are thinking about the person, how we are taking their ability, it matters. And once in the Manovikas, the student who comes very first day, we plan or very basic plan, the person centered plan and all these things, and gradually we develop it, and we make the transition in it, and they go through all these phases, they pass through all these phases, and we always present them as a student. We don't say you have the problem or whatever. And if you see the prasansa, the second part is the prasansa, the paroksh stuti, the praise. If we talk about the praising, we have seen in Manovikas, our two students, they have got the national award. Many of students, they are getting all the awards and everything. So the things is recognized by the government or recognized by the society, accepted by the society. So gradually we can say if we put all these things, so this is very much important. In Manovikas, we talk about the strength, quality, then ability, which make them the successful. These are the students. And here he is the Rishi received the national award in 2016. Thereafter he was invited by our Prime Minister sir to talk about what kind of technology, what kind of things he's using. So this is somehow, it is very good things which we have seen and we have observed, we have experienced at Manovikas. So thank you very much. This much I have to say. Any question or anything, the most welcome.
Thank you. A big thank you to both Dr. Naizami and you, Dr. Bhuvan. Dr. Naizami covered very well the situation on the ground, why we having a drop in enrollment, the perceived barriers, and what the national education policy envisages for higher education. For our sector, it's interesting, especially about the open distance learning and vocational education. And again, notably, the academic bank of credit is a very good thing that they have added. What steps need to be taken for the success of vocational training? This also Dr. Naizami covered very well. And Dr. Bhuvan, you were very good in explaining to us about the basic needs of persons with intellectual and developmental disability in employment, especially when they have to work with non-disabled, the barriers that they come across, and how to access their skills and interests. And it's very interesting to know about how your Think College works. It's a very progressive idea, and it was encouraging to also know about the success stories of Sandhya and Gorangi. And thank you also for sharing about the important aspects of capacity building. So once again, thank you both on your very important deliberations. We next have our last speaker, Commander Sriram Visual, who is the dynamic president of Parivar, National Confederation of Parents Organizations, which has over 300 registered parents organizations affiliated with us, providing services with persons with intellectual and developmental disability. Commander Bijur is a parent with a wide range of experience in advocating for empowerment of persons with intellectual disability, as well as collaborating with central and state governments, forming policies, schemes, and provisions to benefit this sector. He is the president of AWMH Maharashtra, which provides early intervention to children from the slums in Mumbai for the last 45 years. Commander Bijur is closely associated with many organizations, including Nirdhar Pratishthan, which is a residential home in Palghar district of Maharashtra. He's focused on capacity building of parent organizations and developing leadership among parents and professionals, especially during COVID-19 period. Commander Bijur has served in the Indian Navy for 21 years, which included 4 years on warships, and he served as Deputy Naval Advisor in the High Commission of India in London. He retired prematurely and joined TCS and later Bharti Airtel. And from 2012, he has invested his whole time and resources for working in the disability sector. His commitment and the rich previous experience has been a great boon to the sector and especially to the parent movement in particular. Welcome, Commander Bijur, and over to you. Commander Bijur will be talking on the national education policy, what it offers to persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities.
Okay. Am I audible now?
Yes, yes, yes.
Great. Thank you very much, Iona Madam, for introducing me. And as I see national education policy, which is still in infancy, has been already dealt with 4 doctors, Dr. Aloka Di, Dr. Poonam Natarajan, Dr. Alka, and Dr. Alok. So I'm sure any such child which is dealt with 4 doctors, which has to be hale and hearty. But now as a commander, it's my job to see that how the child, when it grows up, works for us and works to the benefit of children with intellectual and developmental disabilities. Now, when I talk about the intellectual and developmental disabilities for this particular lecture, I'll be mostly focusing on intellectual disability, autism, and possibly ASHD. For these 3 disabilities, I'll be focusing because their requirements are slightly different from the other disability requirements. I'll just put my slides. Now, I had made out one slide to see where we are today, and then, of course, we can see where we later on go. If you see the slide here, I have put 4 questions for the primary education today. Is it fostering unique capability of individual student? Most of us would say no. Is it giving a priority on foundational literacy and not on rote memory? Possibly no. Can the child choose own path to learn what she wants to learn? Again, a no. And can the child attain optimum outcome of in terms of physical, neuromotor, sensory, cognition, socio-emotional development? Not at all in the present primary setup. And is there a focus on developing social capacity, behavior, ethics, cleanliness, teamwork, cooperation? That is the social skills. Again, I think it is between yes and no. So when we look at it, we find that why our children are not able to get adjusted in the primary system which is prevalent today. And let me hasten to add here that the second most painful moment for a parent is, the first painful moment is when he comes to know that his child is disabled or the child is with special need. And the second painful moment is when the child is mostly turned out from a mainstream school saying that isko leke jao and put him in some special school. So every parent wants to put his or her child in the mainstream school. And that is what these 5 capabilities which will define whether the mainstream education will stand up to the requirement of our children. And I say yes. These are the 5 requirements. In fact, these are the 5 objectives of the new national policy. But let me also hasten to add, in fact, I think Dr. Poonam, she also mentioned that the policy is only an intent or a direction to the government. It is not an act. So it is for us, we parents, how much we push the government on this policy to implement so that our children get benefited. Now let's see what is the NEP offering. And I had just highlighted few things which I always thought that if we know that this is going to be provided for our children under the new policy, then we can look at it more closely. The first is the education system that caters for our children needs. I'm saying children with O, that is our children. Then the second and most important is Diksha, which is digital infrastructure for knowledge sharing. Third is vocational crafts and mentoring introduced at school level. Fourth is teachers training curriculum caters for our children requirement. It's not just good enough to have all these requirements, first three requirements in the school, and the teachers not being trained for that. And the fifth is honest recognition of this policy, that how much exclusion is happening now, and then showing their intent to include our children. And the last one, not only about children, but this policy also gives us a unique ability for our adults who have been left out till date to attain foundational literacy and life skills. Now, these are the 6 highlights, and these I have mapped it to the requirement of our both children and adults with intellectual disability. So let's see how it works out. Now, this has been very adequately explained by Aloka Di, and I will not get into it, but I would just hasten to add here that the fundamental thing is the existing education starts, the schooling starts from 6 onwards. Government has been talking about early intervention, which is one of the basic requirement for our sector, for the children with the developmental needs or the delayed milestones. We have been talking about making the education where they work. All that part doesn't figure in the present education. It will figure in the new education policy. So let's see, where do we get here? Now, the first and the foremost which this policy talks about is ECCE, Early Childhood Care and Education. I would replace this early childhood care with what we know today as early intervention. So this policy really provides entire early intervention. In fact, something I must hasten to add here again is that the framework, which is for 0 to 6 years, though it is mentioned 3 to 6 years, but there are 2 sub frameworks. One is for 0 to 3 years, the second is from 3 to 6 years. These are the 2 frameworks which are NCERT is supposed to design. That means we are really getting out of the medical model, and here it will be a development model which the child will face from the day the child or the parents know that he may have some risk of disability. That's something excellent which is going to come in here in this policy. And then I think Poonam madam had also talked about transport. Yes, this policy puts onus on the government to ensure that every child gets education, and that education is about reaching the school or wherever the education is being provided to that child. So that also is being taken care. Someone has come in there. It's not visible fully on my screen, so I have to read it from my slides. Now, just to say, since I talked about 0 to 3 and 3 to 6, now this is going to be taken care by the Anganwadi worker. And we know today how much are these Anganwadi workers loaded and what all work they do. So this policy specifically talks about making the Anganwadi workers responsible, and not only responsible, but being trained to provide the kind of education. And of course, the Anganwadi workers will also be provided the complete wherewithal by which they can impart that education to the child. So that means they are talking about high quality infrastructure, play equipment, well-trained Anganwadi workers, and the focus will be on cognitive, motor, sensory development in an enriched learning environment. I hope it all comes through. It will be a boon, and then there will be no early intervention as such required. The child will get his early intervention from the Anganwadi, which is required to get it today. Then the second talk is about ECC. They have really brought out the best of where the education can be imparted. I am not an educationist, but looking at the activity-based, inquiry-based, and tools and problem solving, painting, visual arts, the kind of things which they have included in the policy, it really looks like a dream. But I would say even if 50% of the dream comes true, then the child, our kind of children who have got intellectual disability, will get adjusted in a primary environment. because they will not be required to do some rote memory assignments with which they'll be easily get bored, and they may have resultant complication within the class itself. So this is the best possible thing which can happen in early childhood care and education. And with this, I think we may not even require special schools, except for, yes, some highly maybe severe or more than severe children who may require, but that will be taken care. Then the second, it talks about, I said that Diksha. Diksha is something which is going to make a difference for the child as well as for the teachers. Because today, though we have special educators teaching in the special school, we always say that any child who goes to a mainstream school ends up there not fitting into the either in the curriculum or even in the pedagogy of the school. Now that is again going to be taken care. Now if these teachers can be retrained, now retraining all the teachers, yes, the policy says, talks about retraining and doing everything for bringing the inclusion, but the wherewithals can be provided by these digital contents. And as I see, digital content for teachers, mentors, service givers can be very easily available today itself. I would say there is a host of such teaching aids in terms of videos and in terms of many other things are available in the digital world, and such things can come in. But what we would insist on the government is the virtual and real sensory integration, the foundational learning labs. No, these are the things which the other countries are already practicing, and very, very successfully they are practicing. Now these are the things which will come to the teachers, where they can hone their skills, and then of course they can impart the same thing to the children. But the thing which excites me maximum is about digital contents for our children and persons with IDD. Now till to date, our children were always considered that no, they are not fit for the technology. But this lockdown itself, 4 months of lockdown, has shown that our children, right from, let's say, age 3 years onwards, you give a mobile in that child's hand and he or she will start fiddling with that mobile, and also finally come to a photograph which he or she likes to see. So that is a kind of aptitude what these children have got for the hardware, I would say mobile hardware. Now that gives us a great opportunity to make them self-learn. If a child can learn to operate a mobile, that is a self-learning. And similarly, the next step for him is learning to learn. What our children today lack because of the low cognitive ability is learning to learn. Now, if that can be honed with the help of these digital techniques, it will be wonderful. We have listed down few things which all can really help them to learn. We always say that children are capable of surprising us. For a change, let the system surprise them. If the system can surprise them and make them learn on their own something, just to operate the digital key, just to rotate their finger on the mouse pad, or just to look at and get interested into something, that itself will be a first achievement. So that's what this digital thing is going to come. What we are looking for is a repeated narrative, because our children can very well and very excellently, they get used to the repeated narrative. Familiar name, characters, sounds, visuals. There are so many serials which our children automatically get hooked to that. And similar serials, if they can be some knowledge imparting serials, the children can start picking up knowledge on their own, and they will be to that extent independent. We worked out few things which we are going to talk about with the people who are right now responsible for this digital infrastructure. Now here again, we are talking about number one, increasing the time, attention span, which again, most of our children lack that as on date. This is one thing where you can increase the attention span and then slowly use that attention span even in teacher to child teaching or in a classroom environment. Then similarly, illustrative e-content on basic concepts of day-to-day living skills. When you show the child in a story form, when you show the child in a form, in a character which he knows, which he has by now get used to it and he considers him or her as his friend, then the knowledge will come much faster and automatically. Similarly, e-content on self-awareness, listening skills, managing feelings, interpersonal relationships. Now, all these things can be very easily imparted to the child either on his own or through the teacher, but using the digital content. And similarly for developing hobbies and even psychosocial development. Now we have Dr. Shanti Alok. I think she is also present, and she possibly I can consider her as my guru also. Now she had listed down the digital contents which the children or persons with IDD can really make use of, and very structured contents. And these contents we are going to give it to the Ministry of Education and kind of follow them up rigorously to say that please develop digital contents or e-contents on these areas which would benefit our children directly. So I go to the next one. Next we were talking about was vocational training. Now what happens? Our children, when they are, let's say, at the age of 12 onwards, no, they will not like to sit in a lower class. Neither the parent would like them to sit in a class where there are children with 5, 6 or 7 years age. And when they go to the higher class, they don't fit into that class. That is how most of the children end up leaving the primary school, or if they are in the special school, never joining a secondary school. Now, this policy gives a very clear guideline to the planners. It says age 12 onwards, every student will take a fun course. I am not talking about only special children. This is for every child. That gives a hands-on experience of sampling important vocational crafts, such as they have given examples. Now we can insist on vocational activities suiting our children level. The policy also says that child will do and learn what he or she wants to learn. It's an open curriculum. So our child or our young student can still be in the class and concentrating more on the vocational training 12 years onwards than on any academics. And future NUIS and any such curriculums will support his further education just on the vocational training, vocational crafts. And second part, why again our children as young students in the school, they feel totally left out, not being mentored by anyone. The teacher is too busy with the rest of the classroom to really pay any special attention to the child, and especially in child's social adjustment within the classroom or in the school. Now here this policy talks about one thing very important for us as parents. It talks about mentoring. It says efforts will be made to involve community and alumni in volunteering efforts to enrich learning at the school, one-to-one tutoring, the teaching of literacy, holding of extra help sessions. Now, as I envisage, and it talks about healthy senior citizen, why would we not have the grandparents like me sitting there in the class and helping the child? Not only my child, but somebody else's child. Today, Parivar parents, all of us who are gathered here are possibly more than over 50 years. We all will fit into this mentoring where we go and sit and spend 2 hours every day in a classroom and making sure that the children with intellectual disability get adjusted and whatever social adjustment they require happens there. So this is again a boon for us, and which is talked about in the National Education Policy. I go to the next one. It talks about now teachers training curriculums and caters for children's requirement. I said earlier also, the first three things will only be successful if the teachers are sensitized and as well as trained to deal with the children with disabilities. Now, this policy talks about 4 years integrated B.Ed, which starts possibly after 12th itself. So instead of they doing a BA in some subject and then going for a B.Ed, they will be specializing in education. And when they start specializing in education, one of the specialty every teacher will have to do will be on the foundational literature and numeracy. Now that is what will bring about the conceptual change in the teacher's thinking, that they will move away from the rote teaching to the foundational teaching, which is again a boon for our children. And it also talks about taking special interest, use of educational technology, learner-centered collaborative learning approaches and all, where the child will be taught what he or she wants to be taught, what he and she is required to be taught, and not what the teacher wants to taught. So that is what is being included in their 4 years B.Ed courses. And they will also be able to do a secondary specialization to teach Divyang teachers. So I feel again, this NEP not only caters for our children, but it also caters for the capacity of the teacher to take care of our children in the classroom. Now, going to the next one, which is, I said, honest recognition. If you recognize a problem, then you are able to solve it. I think the first time the central government has recognized the problem, that 50.9% of the children with disability, here I am not talking about intellectual disability, they drop out during or immediately after primary school. The government is admitting for the first time in the policy that dropout at higher secondary level is as high as 88.8%. Never has the government, they always otherwise talk about, they bring out the best of the cases and say that, see, so much of education is going on and so many children are going into mainstream higher education. So honestly, the intention has been shown that yes, today in the present education system, inclusion is a far-fetched dream, but they are taking special measures, which we have described in my earlier 6 slides, that one-to-one teacher, tutor, peer, open schooling, all that part is there. And this is how they are going to make the education accessible to our children with intellectual disability. I may also add here that section 31 of RPWD Act is also maintained specifically in the NEP. It says that the child or the parent still would have a right to go to a school where he or she feels her son or daughter can get the best of education. So from the children, now I come to the adults. Our children, like my son is 37 years old. Somewhere he missed the bus for the inclusive education because of the inadequacy of the system. For them, there's so much of things which is available. It talks about a curriculum opportunity for adults to attain foundational literacy. I do not want him to become graduate at this age of 37 or 38 years. What we require is a foundational literacy and life skills. Now that is going to become the part of adult education. And mind you, these 5 A, B, C, D, E. A is about foundational literacy. B is about critical life skills, which we have been talking about in our self-advocacy. Critical life skills. Then C is vocational skills development. Again, we have been talking again and again about our children getting some vocational, or our adults getting some vocational skills. D is basic education. Okay, the ones who missed out and still had that much capability, they can go for the higher education, basic education, and continuing education, holistic adult education courses. Now, I again feel that this, if it comes through the way it is mentioned in the education policy, many of our adults would also be able to rejoin the sector under the Ministry of Education, and with the help of what we are talking about, digital e-content availability, this can become a reality, a sweet dream for the parents whose children today or whose adult persons today have got absolutely no opportunity to learn at this age. So I finish it here, but I'll come as to where do we stand and what we should do. See, as Parivar NCPO, with all the organizations, most of the organizations are with us today. We articulated our requirements in 2016 and 2018. 2 years we articulated to Ministry of, that time it was MHRD. And as I see, most of them have been included. This is a dream come true policy. But now we are going to pick the low hanging fruits. And what in our strategy we found was the low hanging fruit today is Diksha, digital knowledge and digital infrastructure. So today Parivar is concentrating on Diksha. We had 2 FGDs, focus group discussions, where many parents, professionals and IT experts took part, and we generally know the framework which we now require from the government. And another good thing is that both NCERT as well as the Ministry of Education, their Director Education, who is in charge for Diksha, have been very supportive. In fact, now they have brought their team which is going to develop for children with special needs to us, and they are going to have very close interaction. Dr. Shanti Olak has been part of that, and possibly in the future would be steering this part with the developers again, which is the NGO. The government has contacted a very good NGO who are possibly bringing even the best of experts from all over the world to develop this infrastructure, and they are very active about how we have been interacting with them, especially for children with special needs. Then the third thing we want to do is build support for bringing special schools under education department. I think as long as whenever the special schools get merged, that's fine. But as long as the special schools remain, let them be with the Ministry of Education. That's what one decision we have taken, and it's a kind of consensus in Parivar that special schools under Ministry of Education will do much better than being, because the exclusion starts from there. From the structural level, the exclusion starts. A special school only thinks about special things only. When it goes into the mainstream, many policies, plans, and even frameworks will come in the special schools also, and that would benefit the children. And then we will, of course, follow. Our next low-hanging fruit is ECCE implementation. We'll see how the ministry wants to take that thing further, and we'll be very, very actively working with the Ministry of Education for making sure that ECC gets implemented to the best of our benefit. And what the state organizations and NGOs can do. First is support national education policy for our children. There have been some discordant tunes which are coming out from various quarters, and some of the state governments might take shadow of that and say that this policy is no good and we want to do something else and all. I think we should put our foot down there. Each state organization must put their foot down and say that no, this is the best for the person with disability or children with special need. Second is raise the subject during every state advisory board meeting. Starting from the next meeting, we want to raise this subject when, and this state advisory board meeting is held under Ministry of Social Justice, or they call Samaj Kalyan Vibhag in states. But let's start raising it and telling them that, look, please follow up on the Ministry of Education. We'll do it directly, and we'll also get it followed through the Ministry of Social Justice. And then remain vigilant at state level as to what policy says is implemented. One of our major misgiving is that the policy may be implemented only where it suits the mainstream children. So let's see, we will especially 0 to 3, 3 to 6. Now, this is very important for us. And finally, please coordinate with Parivar, share data and information from state level so that we also take it up at the central level. The effort has to be both at state level and central level. So thank you very much. And for Diksha, if you want any follow-up or if you have any suggestions, please do mail us on parivarncpo@gmail.com. We are taking it up very, very strongly with the government, because we feel that even if Diksha comes out well, many of our teachers will feel empowered, and of course our children will also feel empowered. Thank you.
Thank you, Commander Bijur. The good insights that you have given into the NEP. On the mainstreaming, you have seen whether they are covering the objectives that we were interested in, and opportunities that are being given to cater to special needs individuals. We covered the early childhood care and education aspect very well, and also Diksha, of course, I think is very close to you, to your heart as well, digital infrastructure and knowledge sharing. It is exciting future for our children. And also the vocational crafts and mentoring that were introduced at the middle level. This is all very important for the knowledge of parents. I think you have done a very good analysis of the NEP and shown us a way forward. Definitely, we will all join hands to ensure that Diksha and the NEP comes to fruition through the implementation. So thank you once again for your your patience for being the last speaker, but it was worth the wait for us. Thank you. I now hand over to the President of Parivar Bengal, Mr. Topon Kaur, for the closing remarks.
Madam, one question is there. Someone sent one question. I passed it to for Dr. Alok Bhuvan. So,
yeah,
Dr. Bhuvan, can you please address it?
Shall I give the answer?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So that question somehow I can give the answer. The question those who ask, he or she may understand very clearly. I'll just start answering my question. I'll go into the 2009 and 10, when the National Vocational Education Qualification Framework was initiated by the Manmohan Singh ji. So that time we had talked about where the person with disability, especially those who are intellectual and developmental disability stands, because they don't have any qualification of 5th class or 3rd class to enter into the NSQF level. So there we had entered the RPL, the recognition of prior learning. And that recognition of prior learning has given us some way where we had started entering our student with intellectual and developmental disability under the NSQF framework. Those days, many people, they were saying, okay, this is the skill development, how the people with intellectual and developmental disability will go on. Later on, we had started the community college through the Indira Gandhi National Open University for the person with intellectual and developmental disability. And we had about 40% was passed in the first year, and we had the good convocation in India International Center, and there Poonam Natarajan and many people were there. So they have observed that those were the people with intellectual and developmental disability. They were not the specific learning disability. So here I am giving you the answer that whatever the things we are doing it for the people with intellectual and developmental disability. And that the question is why the people with intellectual and developmental disability are not portrayed as the intellectual disability in our system. In Manovikas, jo hamare paas student hote hain, we talk about the student. We don't talk about the people, those who has the intellectual and developmental disability. We don't say you are the disabled person. So our presentation about the student is very clear. Once they are in our center, in our institution, they are the student. They are not the intellectual disability or anything. That's why we have crossed this barrier of thinking. We are not talking, we are not accepting as a intellectual with developmental disability. We are giving the very good praise for them, very good presentation for them. That's why today we have about every year in last few years we have the data is about 40 to 50 persons with intellectual and developmental disability, they are going into the higher education. About hundreds of persons with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they are going through the skill development program, they are earning well with the Dalmia and other big short companies. So if I'll say, I'll take the Commander Biju's word, if you are mentoring with the person, if you are sitting and talking and understanding that choice, you can go any level with them, you can take any skills for them. And that is a very good important part is the Manovikas, whatever the Manovikas we are doing, we are not giving anything like the other schools ki hamare paas koi qualification framework nahi hai, koi qualification ka certificate nahi hai. Even we have the those who are in the student coming to the Manovikas, they have the NIOS certificate, they have the CBSE certificate, they have the skill development ka NSQF certificate. So if you are providing the certificate, in that certificate it is not written, it is not mentioned that the person is intellectual disability or specific learning disability. They are gaining the certificate, they are getting whatever the job is based on the certificate. So whatever we are doing, it is not confusing, it is very much clear. We are working for the intellectual and developmental disability, we are presenting them as a student, that's all. Yeah, thank you for questioning. Yeah.
Okay, Ayanadi, are you there?
Yes, I have. If there are no more questions, then we can. I hand over to Mr. Tapun Kaur, who's the president of Parivar Bengal, to give the closing remarks. Tapunda?
Yes, there is no more question. Yes, you can hand over to Tapunda.
Yeah, it's time up also.
Tapunda. পূর্ণাশিস তপনদা আছে তো?
শোনা যাচ্ছে?
হ্যাঁ, একদম একদম শোনা যাচ্ছে।
Good evening. Good evening. On behalf of Parivar Bengal, I thanks to all of our speakers who have presented today for their different angles of views on national education policy. I also thanks to our participant today. Thank you all. That's all. পরিবার বেঙ্গলের পক্ষ থেকে আজকে অংশগ্রহণকারী সমস্ত বক্তা এবং যারা অংশগ্রহণ করেছেন সবাইকে ধন্যবাদ জানালাম এবং আগামী ভবিষ্যৎ যাতে আমাদের ছেলে মেয়েদের ভালো হয় সেই আশা করে শেষ করছি। থ্যাংক ইউ অল।
Thank you speakers. Thank you Alka di, thank you Alka madam, thank you Commander Biju, and thank you Dr. Pune. Thanks to the all participants.
Thank you.
And Dr. Bhuvan also.
Thank you. Alka Nizami ma'am also. Thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Okay. Arunashish, you can finish it.
Okay, thank you, Shonda.